Hello and welcome back to Cooking the Books with me, Gilly Smith, the podcast which takes us through 4 food moments from the books of our favourite food writers. It's about all of life through the prism of food. And this week I'm with an old friend of the podcast, the king of vegetables, Joe Woodhouse.
You know, if you've made a big pot of lentils with sauce and you can add some different spices to it or top it with yoghurt or cheese or pickles and kind of take it in a different direction, but you've kind of got that base, nutritious sort of element ready to go.
A lot has happened since we first met on Zoom to talk about his first book, More Daily Veg. The Ukraine war has rocked his family. His wife is the Ukrainian food writer and cook for Ukraine champion, Olia Hercules. Their 3-year-old son was diagnosed with a mild form of autism. And vegetables have actually landed properly on the British plate. I met him just before an event he was doing at Hove's Cookbook Bake for his new book, More Daily Veg. And as we sat overlooking the sea, we pondered on the enormity of it all.
I mean, this is probably the most luxurious place to have an interview. I think you kind of jumped straight out of the car and we're sitting now looking out at the sea rolling in, the sun gently setting over the horizon.
We're here to talk about your second book, Joe. It's more of the same, it has to be said, and it actually says that on the tin, as it were. First of all, why did you feel you had so much more to say about vegetables?
Someone described it recently as sort of very much the same, but with a kind of fresh, updated look. And it's kind of, it is that. It's a progression. It's a couple of years later. It's responding to the way that I think a lot of people responded to the first one. So I kind of try to put a lot of people were batch cooking a lot of things and taking them in for lunches and, having meals ready for the week. So I kind of tried to make a lot more recipes that responded well to either being broken down and taken packed lunches, or that you could kind of stop at certain points and then kind of just finish or use the base of it in multiple different ways, and kind of just trying to take into account the way that people were cooking from the last one, because there was so many. It was amazing just seeing everyone cook and kind of make all the dishes around the world and online. It's interesting, isn't it? Because actually things have moved on an enormous amount since we first spoke in the world, but also the way we eat. I remember we talked about how you turned vegetarian at 10 and we were talking about being a vegetarian. I don't feel that this book is for vegetarians necessarily. I was just having a chat with Tristan in Cookbook Bake, who's getting ready for your event tonight, and he said that he's not vegetarian, but he absolutely would cook every recipe from it. I think that's the big change now, isn't it? That we're all looking for really lots and lots of different ways to make our dinner really interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, that is very much a selling point, I guess, is how to cook a steak or a piece of fish, or what you're doing with your chicken thighs, but it's just a bit of a lot of inspiration for vegetables and what to put on the side and how to kind of maybe up that amount. I think there's a lot of people are kind of dropping meat from days or certain meals just to kind of looking at the planet and what's going on, but also just then health wise, but it's just a way of trying to help people get a lot more veg kind of packed in, and I think it is something, and it's help with kind of that, but also it appeals to everyone is kind of the idea, but it's a non kind of stress. You can swap in what you like, what you don't like. If there's use the recipes as a template, or add some meat in if you want. That's what you.
Yeah, absolutely. You casually mentioned those massive issues, the planet and health. I think that people are, and we've, of course, since we last spoke, we've got a cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
Those 3 things are driving the most enormous changes. I think that people, once you realise, and I remember the Bosch boys telling me ages ago, maybe about 4 years ago, that actually they went vegan or vegetarian, I think it was at that time, overnight, because they felt so much better. They just thought, why on earth would we ever feel that heavy again? And I think that since you and I first spoke,
so many more people realise that actually you just feel a lot better, a lot lighter, your body works better if you eat more vegetarian food. And that's not to say that you won't have a lovely Sunday roast or the occasional, sort of slow cooked belly pork or something like that. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Not for you, but for me. But mainly vegetarian, and that of course contributes massively to our health and to our planetary health and to our purse. Isn't that the biggest change?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it does that thing where you really appreciate it as well. If you, liken it to a glass of wine on a Friday night, if you've been abstaining for a few days and it just that kind of, your taste buds kind of fire up and tingle and you kind of really appreciate it, rather than, if you had steak every night, it kind of doesn't do quite the same thing. But I think it's also thinking about and connecting with what you're eating and how you're eating and where it's come from. And if you have a roast chicken on the weekend, make some stock out of the bones, it's pretty, and some of the trimmings from the roast veg, and then you can kind of have a noodle soup but use the stock, and then you're kind of getting a bit of that, but you don't necessarily have to buy a load of fresh meat just to kind of satiate. It's just kind of slightly clever ways that maybe just eking it out a bit. It's just going back to traditional ways of cooking, really, and the way that people used to eat.
Traditional ways of cooking around the world, and that's very important. We talked before about your food photography taking you right around the world, and we do go to Tel Aviv we look at Chinese warm potato salad, never seen that one before, with Szechuan pepper, and we look at Ukrainian food, Brazilian food. I mean, literally ideas from around the world. Is that still what really, really excites you?
I like a lot of the dishes that happen to be vegetarian, rather than trying to turn things too much, kind of trying to de-meat something. It's sort of, you get a bit into sticky water sometimes, but and it is a bit of a trying to cherry pick a few ones that have really spoken to me and that have stood out, just because I like these. So if you like my cooking, you should, you might like these as well. And it just seemed it's kind of a fun way to dot around a little bit, and you can kind of group some together, or build, then go the reverse and build a meal backwards from that inspiration. It's just to kind of try and fire up some synapses and get people thinking, in a different way than what maybe your meat and 2 veg or your 3 veg, if you know.
I love what you say. You say exploring and eating outside of what you know is a magical thing, and that's what food really should be, shouldn't it? Are we still as picky as we once were about some vegetables?
Yes, I think we are. I think it takes a long time to kind of rewrite that. Brussels sprouts is probably a good example. I'm cooking a dish with Brussels sprouts tonight at Cookbook Bake, but they seem to be a lot more accepted now. But I think that's taken quite a long time, but that's because most of the time people were probably just cooking them to mush, and they weren't really doing that much with them, and not using them as an ingredient or as a kind of a layer in. It's a dish from the book where it's tahini, whipped tahini. You make a kind of quick tomato chutney. Have roast sprouts on top, and then kind of crispy breadcrumbs with a bit of lemon zest, and it's sort of that way where it's kind of a warm salad that's kind of could be a side, could be a starter. You could add something else to it, but it's just using it as an ingredient rather than boiling the death out of it. Kind of roasting is your friend, I think, a lot of the time with vegetables and things. But it's
and in terms of saving energy as well, bung a whole load of vegetables in the oven, roast them up, and then produce some lovely sauce with it. I noticed you're doing something with tahini. Are you doing Brussels sprouts with tahini? Which one is it?
Yeah, the tahini sauce is another one that's kind of dress that on anything and it'll make it taste a lot better. But I just think that why not try something a little bit different? If you haven't had it, there's masses of information either in my book or other people's books, but online. Just try a different veg and but if you take something that you like a tahini dressing, or just toss it with some grains and make a salad, it's quite a nice way to explore something new in a gentle way.
Yeah, I noticed that you say things like stick the beans on overnight to soak, and then do a few bits and bobs, and then get up in the morning, and that is a real sort of cucina povera kind of way to eat, isn't it? It's not really very traditional for us Brits. Are we learning now? You mentioned batch cooking before. Are we beginning to think ahead about how to get the best out of our food and the best flavours?
For me, it's if you do the small little things, time's your friend. The longer you can, the slower you can do a lot of some of the cooking, or let it sit once it's made and all the flavours marry. It improves with time. And I think a lot of the time before going to bed, I sort of think, I could just mix up a dough or a starter for a dough, or stick some beans on the soak, and then you've kind of done the long part of the work ahead, and then you can kind of crack on the next day, the next morning. And the same with beetroots, or if you're boiling a bit some veg or potatoes, I kind of always do some extra ones if they're going to be boiling anyway. You're not using that much energy to kind of add a few more in, and then you've got them boiled. Stick them on while you're doing something else, and forget while you're pottering around, and then they're done. They can sit in the fridge. You can make salads. You can kind of dress them, puree them, crush them, and roast them. For some crispy potatoes or something later. But it's just kind of always do a bit extra, so you've got kind of something on hand for a quick lunch or an easy dinner, and then you're not using that much, if any more. Much more energy as well, which is a good thing.
It's interesting, isn't it? And maybe that's what's changed. Alexina Anatole talks about time being the best ingredient, or one of the key ingredients. You talk about it being your friend. Actually, maybe finally, we've been exposed to such great food for the last 20, 30 years. Finally, maybe that time poor narrative is going to be chucked in the bin, in the recycled bin, maybe not, because finally the idea that actually, beautiful vegetables like celeriac can be caramelized if you give them time in the oven. Maybe we're understanding a little bit more about technique and marinading and soaking beans overnight, that actually we're giving food a chance, finally. What do you think?
Yeah, I think hopefully some of the things stuck from COVID and lockdown, and having all of that time and being at home, and being able to cook and think and plan, and obviously going back to work, is kind of finding that balance. And I think if some of the positives do stick, then that's it is a very good thing. I'm guilty of working late into the night. I'll sort of stop working and do hang out with the kids and do bedtime and things, and then go back to work, which I'm trying to kind of get a bit better of, but you've got to fit it in. But then batch cooking is a way of counteracting some of that, where you have this kind of, you've made this amazing meal that then you can kind of take in different directions with, if you've made a big pot of lentils and sauce, and you can add some different spices to it, or top it with yogurt or cheese or pickles, and kind of take it in a different direction. But you've kind of got that base nutritious sort of element ready to go. And that's the best kind of fast food, is food that you kind of pre-made, spend a lot of time, and effort putting it, on a Sunday or whatever it may be. And I froze quite a lot from cooking and testing, and it's been so great actually using that side of things, where you've got kind of something ready to go from the freezer, which is really nice and been handy.
Your own superstore, I always see it as. Working late at night and hanging out with the kids is a really great way, actually, isn't it, of spending time with the food. And your first food moment is making pizzas with the kids.
My son we don't really do any screens that much, but we were looking at his music video to this song, his favourite song, and then we got suggested this pizza video, and we I clicked on it because it was a food-based thing, and he just got massively into this is our 3-year-old, into these really hardcore pizza dough videos. And I sort of thought, well, actually I can make these for him, and so we can kind of do it in real life. And then so it pretty much kind of most weekends, and we sort of did these big pizza parties where we're kind of just giving out pizzas to people in the on the street, or people coming over, and kind of an excuse to make a load of pizzas, but just trialing out different dough recipes, different ways of cooking. But yeah, kind of deep diving into kind of super nerdy pizza universe.
Since we last talked, Wilf has been diagnosed with what? Olia did tell me, but I can't even remember what it is. It's basically, he's a neurodivergent child, which must make you think about a whole load of things in a completely different way. How does it affect your daily life around food?
Yeah, it's Fragile X syndrome, so Olia has it as well. Yeah, it does, but I don't know, in a way, it more solidifies what we were doing initially, and just everything was so based around food, and he loves food, and so kind of use that as excuses to kind of go out and about and kind of discovering things, or get him. I mean, I brought him a knife for his first birthday, so he just chops on the weekends and things. Kind of get him chopping all the mushrooms and whatever it is, salads, cucumbers and things, and the and then stuff like that. But I kind of get him to make up a salad dressing each night, because he loves these really punchy salad dressings, and because he loves the stimulus in his mouth, kind of just really intense flavors. So he kind of makes these really punchy salad dressings. We kind of try and have a salad with each meal as well. But it's there's a lot that comes with it, but I've not really changed my approach, I don't think, to how I would have been. If anything, it kind of he's really interested in food because he sees us doing it.
Yeah, and he was strapped to your body while you were doing cookery demos, and when he was a little boy and when he was a baby. But tell us about Fragile X syndrome. What is it, and how does it manifest?
The main issue that you see with that Wilf has is it's a communication. So he has all the words, he has everything in his head, but he can't. It's sort of, I guess, in a layman's way, his brain doesn't communicate to his mouth, so it's hard for him to develop speech. Although he kind of go through these, you have these bits, and just as you're kind of thinking, oh, there's nothing changing, then he'll suddenly leaps and bounds, kind of jump ahead. And at the moment, he's kind of saying massive things, and he's really enjoying the songs of his new nursery, because he just sings. I came home last night, he was sitting on the sofa drawing and singing to himself, and that's quite sort of another sort of milestone and things. But it's sort of, I guess, if you were going to put it in a basic way, it's kind of mild autism, but it sort of manifests in different ways. Once you get past a certain level, then they kind of stop counting, and they're just sort of where you're diagnosed with it, and it's sort of, but you can be on then quite a large spectrum. But in that, with going back to the previous question of using food and things, is actually I do take him out and get him to meet people and see things in new situations, and try and help make that the norm, so he's not kind of worried about or gets stressed by kind of new stimuli and things.
Yeah, it's not a question of overstimulation then. I mean, one of the things, your next food moment is actually about your property in France, in the Auvergne. Exposing any child, anybody at any age, to something like this is just incredible. I mean, how does he deal with the new language, the French markets, all the wonderful things that you're doing there? Tell us about it.
Well, yeah, weirdly, for someone who can't or has issues speaking, he picked up French in the kind of, he loves shouting bonjour and au revoir and merci to everyone as we're leaving shops or markets and different things. But that was very much a large part of why we moved on doing that, and having someone so we've got a property that we're doing up in the Auvergne, just south of Vichy, that we're going to do a cookery school and food tours to, because the other main reason was we used to do this to Ukraine, which we obviously can't do at the moment, and don't know if or when that would come back. So it was kind of trying to create a similar thing and keep that kind of alive, albeit in a different country, but it was the same kind of ethos. And so it's been amazing discovering the area and different markets and meeting people and just produce. I mean, the French markets we travel. We travel. There's one that we go to nearby town on Mondays that we always go to. We know all the guys we go to. The cheese ladies. There's a refrigerator truck that we get cheese from. They just love Wilfred, and they kind of just give him massive samples where I try and kind of take it to give it to him. They're like, no, that's for him. And it's this kind of massive block of cheese that they just, kind of lavish on him, which he thinks is amazing, because the kind of cheese truck is Toys R Us for him kind of thing. But it's just, it's just so much fun kind of tearing around, and you're getting literally what people are growing. So it's sort of hyper seasonal. I deliberately got us a really small fridge, or like a kind of a big enough fridge that you can keep a few things in, but the idea is to kind of not have a lot of fresh kind of food and be making kind of different things, but not kind of storing too much, just kind of just cooking loads of different things and testing and developing recipes, and but it's a lot of fun kind of deep diving into that and kind of having a lot of the local dishes and local, I mean, just the local cheeses alone are just kind of absolutely fascinating and delicious.
Yeah. Why Auvergne in particular?
I suppose, I mean, it's like Kent to England. It's the market of the garden of France, and just loads of produce, loads of history with food. I know a few people kind of that do different food things a bit further south from us, but it's up in a forest, up a mountain, and it's just kind of nice and tranquil and quiet. And in the evenings when the breeze goes through the trees, it sounds like you're at the sea. Actually, it sounds very similar to this. It's just quite a magical place.
And this is you and Olia cooking together, doing cookery lessons and cookery tours?
Yeah, so Olia's going to carry on doing the ones that she does with Natalia, Experience Ukraine and Beyond on Instagram. And so they just did one to Georgia, but they're going to do similar tours when we get it set up, where it's just going around markets and produce, walking through the forest and foraging for mushrooms, cooking classes, doing dumplings and borscht and bograch, where you cook this soup on open fire, and kind of all of that kind of things. We'll do some then together. Maybe we do some kind of guest chef things where we do a small course and a big meal, or couple with a local restaurant and do a kind of a couple of nights kind of cooking up with us. I'm also going to set up a brewery there, because I don't know if last time we spoke I'd said at home in London I'm a licensed brewer, and I'd sell her as a bonded warehouse. So it's all spontaneous ferment beer that I'm going to pretty much move to there, I think. So we might do kind of big fermentation classes, or you could kind of do a week of fermentation and make a beer in that time and things like that, and but just and see what people want as well. I mean, it's kind of, we're there and the space is there. The idea is that maybe we end up moving there full time, see how it goes, but stay in London for now, but just see how it goes.
Exciting. Let's move on to your next food moment. And what I love about British food culture is that you can go from the food of the Auvergne straight to dal makhani without batting an eyelid.
Yeah, well, that variety is the spice of life, isn't it? We bring quite a lot of cheese back with us to keep the dream alive. But yeah, the dal makhani was. I'm actually talking with those guys at the moment to doing a pop-up out that way. But it was just such a that thing where you eat a dish and it's just a bolt of kind of a shock of lightning of like, wow, this is incredible, and it just kind of wakes you up, and it's sort of so. Everything was in such a kind of perfect balance, and it is sort of that kind of creamy, spicy, rich, buttery lentils, and a kind of cut with a crispy, punchy salad of kind of tough leaves, but with fennel and onion, spring onion and things, and herbs, and it's just such a kind of lovely.
It is.
Lovely way to eat.
I made it last night. It is absolutely fantastic. This dal makhani actually isn't yours. This is your friend Lakshmi. Tell us about this.
Yeah, well, we were visiting our friend Henrietta Inman, who runs Wakeland's Bakery out in Suffolk, and it was actually her friend Lakshmi that made this dal makhani that she asked her to make it, and it was so I kind of got fairly quickly got in contact and was just like, this is incredible, can I have the details of how to make this, if I could possibly put it in the book, and fully crediting, because I want to put a recipe like this in the book, but I can't, to my mind, beat this. So
and she said, yeah,
it
absolutely.
seems it seems sensible to do. It's sort of, if it isn't broke,
Well, exactly. While we're talking about bakeries, can I just mention the focaccia with potato and rosemary? I've never had potato in my focaccia before. Does that make me a very bad person?
I mean, I grew up on the Scarborough coast, and I used to eat a lot of chip butties because I used to go rowing on the sea, and I think it's kind of mashing of those two worlds where it's a nice, everyone loves the focaccia, but then it makes it into a slightly bit more of a meal, but also a bit more of a substantial side. But it's kind of channeling chip butty vibes in that sprinkle a bit of vinegar on top and you're pretty much there. But double carb is what's not to like.
Thanks for listening. Do rate and review the podcast if you like it over on Apple Podcasts, and then head to my Substack to see what Joe has cooked up for us over on Extra Bites.